Hey everyone, and welcome back to Hack and Hustle.
Joining us today is my friend Mark Cervantes. Mark has been a sales and channel leader in tech and cyber for nearly 20 years. He currently runs global alliances and MSSP strategy at Clarity, where he recently rejoined after previously coming into the business as head of channels and alliances with Medigate, which Clarity purchased in 2022. Mark, welcome to Hack and Hustle. Great to have you here, man.
Good to be here. Thanks.
So today we are talking about the channel and how do you get the most out of the channel. This is a space you've spent a good portion of your career. You and I have personally had many discussions about what great channel leadership looks like, what it takes to be successful. And so we're hoping to get your insights on how to do this well, really from the perspective of a company, right? How to think about the channel, how to build a good channel program, how to drive a channel program for results. So really looking forward to this conversation.
I got to inject one thing here, right? And this dawned on me actually just as you started to open up. Having been a practitioner for so long, I had no clue what I would hear the word the channel, right? And I would hear suppliers and vendors be like, "Oh yeah, we got to talk to our channel and this and that." And I'm maybe we could start off by like, what is the channel? What does the channel do? Because I think there's practitioners who'd want to know, but I would bet that there's sellers who are like, oh, that's what the channel does. So maybe we start with that. Can we do that?
Sure. Happy to try to, shine some light on that. I mean, look, the channel is, the way I always kind of describe it is it's anything that's indirect, right? Because if a seller walks in the door and he's talking to a customer and he can close that deal directly with them on the company's paper, then that's direct, right? But when you start talking about value-added resellers, you start talking about MSSPs, you start talking about GSIs, now you're talking about your channel. And the reason they use the word the channel is because all of those different people are relevant within there, right? Sometimes all those different types of companies are relevant. So they just call it the channel. And what they mean is indirect channel, right? There's going to be a third party in the middle of the deal. What does get lumped in there sometimes, and it's kind of dangerous, is, and it happens to early stage companies because nobody's assigned to that one task, is tech alliances, right? So if 1 + 1 makes 3 with another technology, we want to go hit the market and talk about that value proposition of our two solutions together, but they're not reselling for you. They're simply a tech alliance. And so you want to really identify that, even though the same guy who runs the channel, i.e. the VARs, the MSSPs, the GSIs, that guy's probably in an early stage company going to also own tech alliances because
super helpful
partnerships. So it just falls in his basket.
That's super helpful. Sorry to interrupt, Brad. But as you were talking, I was just like, "Oh my gosh!"
No,
like,
I mean, maybe we take it down one more level, right? And Mark, you mentioned VARs and MSSPs and GSIs. It's part of the alphabet soup that we have in our industry. Can you talk a little bit about how to think about each of those categories and like what they will do for you and what motivates them?
Yeah, what motivates them? That one's the same across the board, right? That's the old term, right? But look, I'll start with the VARs, the value-added resellers, right? They're truly that. They're resellers. They're trusted advisors to the customer, right? So, if you're a net new company, which Medigate's prime example, right? I mean, we had, I got there when it was a $5 million seed round. So talk about ground floor. And we were walking in, and I mean, people had never even heard of us, right? And the idea of getting our name out in the field, one of the quickest ways to do that is to start working with value-added resellers who are always looking for the next new technology to represent so that they have the disruptive technology in their back pocket when they're talking to customers. But those companies have sold to that customer probably multiple different technologies and over years and years. So they have a relationship with them. They know the stakeholders at these companies. They have procurement channels in place, things like that. And that's the value-added reseller. And those guys are super important and probably the easiest ones to get started with when you're a young company, right? Because they're looking for the next disruptive technology. Then you get a little bit bigger and you start, really talking with maybe even the GSIs who they're seeing you make noise in the industry. Their customers are asking about you, so they want to add you to their solutions, offering, and they want to put you into the discussion around, their overall, strategy for the company, right? These systems integrators. And then you get to a point where you have the MSSPs, and those MSSPs are really companies who are providing security services around solutions, right? So sometimes they'll deal with a customer that they didn't help them buy anything. They've been brought in strictly to come help them manage the suite of technologies that they own because it's gotten too top heavy and their internal team can't manage it, or their internal team doesn't have the acumen, right? And so they go out and they look for an MSSP, and that MSSP has to come in here, understand what solutions they've purchased, for what purpose, and then put a strategy in place to use those solutions to manage that company's security posture, right? All of these, though, have an indirect sale capability. GSIs will resell you. It's not where they make their money. They don't really care because they make their money on the services, right? The same is true with the MSSPs. Almost the way the analogy I always use when I'm talking to our internal leadership, so they understand what I'm trying to achieve with our partners, is for every dollar they sell of your software, they're looking to make $4, $5, $7, $8 in services, right? And if they're not, you're not going to get that much attention of theirs, right? But that's kind of the landscape, and that's kind of how I think, at least the companies that I've brought to the marketplace, that's exactly what we've done. Is we focused on first those value-added resellers that'll give us the time of day that my teams can connect with in the field and go take a couple of deals down here and there, and that starts to make noise in the industry. And then the bigger behemoths like the Accentures and PwCs and organizations like that start to hear your name, and they start wanting to talk with you, and it grows and grows and grows from there.
Nice.
Super helpful.
As an early stage company, like if you were given advice to a CEO or CRO at an early stage company, what would you say about whether to lean into the channel? Where does it make sense? Why does it make sense? What are the trade-offs? And how do you get attention of those guys?
If I was just advising a board or a particular CEO, I would start by saying, look, build your channel as quick as you can. Now, what does that mean? Do I have to go hire a channel guy? Not necessarily. You can hire a CRO or, your VP of sales who's channel friendly, who has relationships, who understands the value of this, force multiplier that is the channel, right? And he can start some of those things going with his contacts at the Optives, the CDWs, the SHIs of the world, or maybe even his buddies over at Deloitte, or you know what I mean. And he starts having those kinds of conversations. He's not trying to close every deal direct, right? Because it doesn't scale, And even if that guy doesn't believe in the channel, if you hire a guy that doesn't believe in the channel, and he just starts hiring more team members, sellers, right? Those sellers inevitably you can't hire fast enough. You can't train them fast enough. You can't afford them. At some point you get too top heavy before they start really bringing in the revenue because nobody knows your name. So a good way to get your name out in the marketplace is for you to have a VP of sales or a CRO who is channel friendly, has contacts in those arenas, starts picking up the phone and having those conversations with those guys. So the name starts to crawl through the ecosystem out there. And ultimately, you get one of them that wants to hang their hat on you. Like I've been very fortunate. I had a great relationship, Brad, where you came from with Medigate. And, Optiv really became a key partner for us. Well, Optiv's a global name, but a massive reseller of technologies in the U.S. And if you can get Optiv to pay attention, you can get Optiv to start saying your name in the verticals that you're looking to get into, you can have some strong success. And not only that, all the other value-added resellers and other partners are going to start going, who's this technology that Optiv's representing? Right. And you're going to expand quickly. So I would tell a board or a CEO, the sooner that you can get activity within this indirect sales motion, the better, because you're going to want to go there. Right? It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. You can scale a company by sheer will alone to 20 million, 25, 50 million with sellers and so forth. But if you ever want to go above that 100 million, 200 million, 500 million in an IPO scenario, you have to have an indirect, ecosystem, and it's got to be robust.
So, Mark, in that vein, though, right? Like, what are some of the misconceptions about it? Because I've spoken to a lot of founders who, like you said, they hire a channel person, and they might have like one seller, or they're still doing founder led sales, and they're like, okay, I got a channel guy, and then like their misconception is that this channel person is suddenly going to make it rain in 2 months, right? Like,
Yeah. I know
and so
that
like
too.
there's like that's a setup for failure, because I've spoken to channel leaders who are like, this CEO doesn't know that this is not a 6-week deal that suddenly we've got inbound pipe, right?
So that opens up a bigger can of worms. I mean, look, the net of it is, first and foremost, these people you've spoken to, these channel leaders, they're not wrong. This takes time. Again, as you heard me just say, this is all about getting brand recognition out there. This is all about a deal or two closing and success happening behind that deal, not just at closing. Somebody needs to be able to point back to a white paper that shows where these guys are happy customers, right? Things like that. And all that just takes time, right? Above and beyond that, you have to do multiple things when you start a channel. Once you hire a guy, if you're going to hire a guy, you're going down that path, you're thinking, okay, I think it's time. You should immediately start putting some resources to the side that you're going to arm that guy with, because he's going to need it, right? He's going to need budget to be able to go play with, right? It's no way, if he can't participate in all of the events that the channel is having, even just going to them, forget putting money down to be in a golf tournament or any of that stuff, or even lunch and learns, he's dead in the water, because then he's just a one-man band picking up the phone, calling everybody, and nobody's listening. The second thing is, you want to also empower the rest of the company, right? You need a CRO that believes in it. You need a CEO that believes in the effort, so that they do things like, I would even say do things like comp neutral comp plans, right, for the sellers. Because if the sellers are out there selling direct, and then when they sell through a channel, and there's a portion of the revenue or the margin that goes away, if leadership dings the seller,
Yeah.
then guess what he's going to do? He's never going to do that again. So, you got to stack the company up with all the necessary attributes for a channel, program to get off the ground. If not, you're shooting yourself in the foot, and you're wasting money on that channel leader, and he's going to bang his head until he leaves.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to test something with you guys, because I'll sometimes get asked by people that are trying to understand the industry, do you think that there's going to be disintermediation of the channel, that there's going to be this trend towards more and more companies going direct? And my answer to that is typically no, because I think that, and this is my hypothesis, and I want to test it because you guys both come from the different perspectives of this world. On the buyer side, Anthony, it's my belief, my observation, that you guys as CISOs get hit up by literally 4,000 cybersecurity companies, right? There's so much inbound, there's so much selling activity, there's so much marketing activity. Having somebody that you have a relationship, that knows you, that you trust, I would think is of value. And then from the flip side, coming from the vendor side, it is hard to build those relationships. It is hard to get your name out there. Having a conduit and having access to deals from folks that do have those relationships is of value. And when you're a startup, your value is in your revenue. It's any sale is you're going to get 10x that, or 15 in the value of the company. So that's where I see the value being on both sides. But I'd like your guys' take. Is that real? Is that right? Do you think that's changing?
Let me throw a counterpoint, a point that might be contentious, and I think Mark might react to right now. And it's not, and actually, I do think this to be the case, right? I think, one, the relationship as a CISO, my relationships were with the individual, right? It was with the channel person who they moved companies. I trusted them, right? I know that I would just call Barbara, right? And she would just do the thing. I'm like, hey, I'm looking for this. She's like, hey, here's the 10, here's the thing. And it almost didn't matter what company she was at, as long as she was at a bar, right?
Yep.
And so we ended up doing a lot of paper with different VARs because Barbara was there, right? And so I think that's something that the larger VARs struggle with, is that as they get transformed together and become these big powerhouses, if they lose some of those key individuals, they actually lose the stickiness with that key mega account that they had. And so I think you're seeing a lot of these boutique channels popping up with somebody who's been in the industry forever and they know Sarah, and Sarah knows Kim, and they work really well together. And you're seeing some of these big VARs being displaced. But the point that the big VARs have, I think, is that they can build good processes to create awareness for the product companies, right? And so instead of just being a one hero system based on a trust, it can be an actual process. The last thing I'll say on this is this: I think it's being disrupted pretty meaningfully in a way that that the Optives and CDWs of the world are not expecting. And it's kind of like they're being eaten by an even bigger fish, which is that you're seeing more and more of the vendors putting their stuff in an Amazon or Microsoft marketplace. And it's a super tough and it's very, very compelling for a buyer to be like, I have a committed spend through the CIO. I need this thing. It's not going to come out of my budget. Well, let me just talk to Microsoft and just do that, right? MasterCard has this really, really fascinating thing of where all the security products owned by MasterCard, you can buy with MasterCard points as a company, right? And so I know there are product companies who reach out to companies and they're like, hey, you've got 20 million MasterCard points that nobody's using. Did you want this product? And the security person's like, this isn't even going to cost money, right? Because MasterCard has to recognize it as revenue, and so they're pushing this, and so I think that the channel is being disrupted in those ways, right? At different types of marketplaces. Mark, what do you think?
I think you just hit the nail on the head. I think there's always going to be the need for the trusted advisor, right? That's not going to go away. If you're a CEO trying to run a bottling company or whatever thing you're manufacturing or you're selling or whatever, this is not your core competency, right? Yeah. So you're going to lean on somebody who lives and breathes these technologies, right? That's not going to go away. In fact, to that end, AWS, they have a competency program now around cybersecurity and even more specific around insurance. So get a load of that, right? Insurance is something that's becoming a real big deal these days, to get cybersecurity insurance. If you've had a ding, good luck trying to get it. But even if you haven't, they're now starting to ask questions around what your security posture looks like, and who's your CISO, blah, blah, blah. And what's happening now is that AWS, because AWS can spend all the money in the world and it just doesn't matter. They don't care if they don't get paid for 20 years on this initiative. They are starting to bring in insurance companies that work with them that say, okay, these insurance companies are going to be the insurance companies of records to our customers. But what we're going to do is these insurance companies are going to understand the technologies that are out there, right? So they're looping this whole thing together. And I mean, the net of it is that is cannibalizing to a certain extent the channel, right? And more, once the CISO or CIO has a purchase off of AWS, through their credits that they had, and it was super seamless, and it didn't cost them anything out of their capex or opex. Like they're gonna look back at that again and again and again, and especially if there's some compensating controls to ensure that what they buy there is the smartest thing they could possibly buy. Yeah. The more they start trusting it, the more that flywheel is going to happen. I foresee that growing immensely. It's a big bet that we're putting our chips into as it relates to my current organization, because it makes sense. And we've got a really sharp guy. We got one of the best in the industry to come and head that for us for a reason.
And what does that look like? And how is that type of program with one of these hyperscaler marketplaces different than how you would think about setting up a relationship with a VAR?
Oh, God. it's night and day. I mean, the relationship with the VAR is, hey, my contact Brad, if you were adopted, hey man, listen, let's have lunch. Let's go talk about what we're doing. Da 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 da. Let me tell you about a success win I have over here, success story of that customer. Da da da. And just pushing and pushing and pushing until somebody walks me in the door. We have a success together, and now that starts to echo through the company, right? And then try to do that over and over and over with every company of magnitude out there. And that just takes time, energy, and effort. What AWS is doing is all of that vetting, all of that whole process. So CISOs might buy from an Optiv or a SHI or a whomever, because of the relationship they've had over time, and because those solutions are readily available to them behind that value-added reseller. Once they have that good experience, because again, AWS is taking the legwork out of it for them. If AWS is selling it, they've already vetted it to be one of the best technologies in the world. AWS spent the resources, time, and energy to get this company even bothered to be listed. And I don't have to go through a whole procurement process. And I've got some credits that I need to burn. I mean, check the box,
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating thing, right? But I still think that it's funny because I think Amazon, back when they were a bookstore, has always played the long game, right? I think if you haven't watched one of the original, oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank on the founder's name of Amazon right now. Bezos. If you haven't watched him,
I like that.
He's 1999, where he's like,
I like me.
Where he's like balding and skinny, and now he looks like the Hulk, right? But and he's driving. I think there's like video. He's like driving this like '93 Ford Focus or something, or a Honda, I think it was, and they were like, "Why do you're worth $1 billion?" He's like, "It's a good economical car, right?" And now he's got a super yacht, right? Like very, very different. But like they were always playing the long game, right? Of like, hey, you know what? We don't need to make money. We can just weather this out. Bars, it's a different. The game is going to shift, right?
They can't do that. They can't do that.
That game is measured in quarters, if not months.
Well, I will tell you, man. I wish my guy Sean, who works for us, was on this call with us, man. I mean, he described this long game that they're playing beautifully, and it harkens back to when they got into the book game.
Yep.
They didn't care. They didn't make money for the first 15 years. And they don't care if they make money right now in selling technologies. What Amazon is playing on is that in 15 years, nobody will buy technology from anywhere but Amazon.
I 100% agree. I think that's where it is, and it's just so. I think companies are in this interesting inflection point, right? So it kind of gets into this thing today of like, we have all these different channel programs. We have these emerging, changing things in how the marketplace and how people are going to buy and sell. What does a great channel program look like today? Like accounting for this, right? Because if I'm a new founder hearing this, I'm like, oh, actually, you know what? I'm gonna go get my new product on the Amazon Marketplace. Like, no, I'm not saying that. Like, we're not saying hire a channel right away. Like, but like, how do you Jenga this to find what's a good program or a great program look like?
I mean, I think the first and foremost thing you have to do is really, and I mean, this is true for any company that's trying to go into the marketplace, right? You need to understand what's your TAM, and how much of it is there. And then as it relates to the channel and the indirect sales component of it is who best sells to that particular TAM, right? Because once you understand who's best selling into industrial or commercial or oil and gas or wherever you highlight, wherever you're strongest, right? You want the guys that have the biggest footprint in there. Once you've identified the right, indirect sellers for you, again, and it might be directly straight to the GSIs or the MSSBs or VARs, it doesn't matter. But once you identify those, then it's, creating the relationships with them. And then I always say this, it doesn't matter how much, leadership talks to leadership. If you don't empower the field to get to know each other, and I mean get to know each other, like I always tell our sellers, man, if you haven't taken who's your top partner in the region, they're like, oh, well, I work very closely with this guy, this company, and this company. Okay, how many of your deals that you have in the pipeline have one of those partners attached to them? And if I go in and they got 30 deals, 60 deals, whatever, and they've got 9 partners attached to a deal. I'm like, well, first off, you're doing yourself a disjustice. If you haven't identified one of the 4 or 5 companies you just told me for every one of those deals, that's your fault. One. Two, if you're not sitting down with the guy that you have the best relationship with for all 4 or 5 of those companies in your territory every month for a cocktail, dinner, a ball game, something, you're doing yourself a disservice because people buy from people they like, people they want to do business with, right? And so it is 100% a ground game, right? So I can set up a channel program and say this is how it's going to work and make sure my board and my leadership agree with me in the whole 9 yards. But if I don't make the sellers, and when I say I don't, I mean me and the VP and the CRO don't work jointly together to make sure that our sellers go and do the work, we will never see a return on investment from a channel. It just won't happen.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, even at the program level, right? I mean, there's all this paper around standard discount levels and deal reg, and here's how pricing should work and tiers and all this stuff. And it seems like most deals today just get negotiated out anyways, right? Like it moves into non-standard pricing and it's just becomes a negotiation. So I think that probably goes back to like building relationships, building trust, and being able to work together. I mean, is that fair?
And also, all of that stuff kind of, and I'm not saying it doesn't exist and can't work, but let's face it. I mean, look, that's when we were selling servers. We're selling complex solution cells. And these are long-winded, sales cycles. Who brought the value to the table at the end of the day? Who really helped navigate the procurement process? Who was the deal maker? Who was the deal closer? Sometimes it's on the channel side. Sometimes it's the individual seller for the technology. And all of those factors come into play on what that margin looks like at the end of the day, right? And then nowadays, there's so many sophisticated buyers and factors like AWS that come into play when it's time to close a deal. To your point, Brad, everything feels like special pricing. So you can go out there and put your whole schema together of, pricing that I'm going to get and so forth. But, if we all want to call a spade, what I just outlined, that's more realistic than
100%.
Your special pricing.
I just had this conversation with my my business partner because we've given a customer a big discount. He's like, "What? Why are we?" And I was like, "Let me show you the discounts that we're seeing." And he's like, "Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I understand now." Right? Like,
and all of that plays into: do you want to try to continue to build a book of business with the partner that's there? Right?
Yeah.
Did this guy walk you in the deal? Did this guy help you navigate or get unstuck from a point where you guys were stuck for 6 months in a POC? Like, did that guy bring that kind of value? Because if he did, don't be short-sighted. Pay that guy properly. Let that guy want to pick up the phone and call 2 or 3 of his other great relationships to see if he can get you in the door. But if you whittle him down to the bare minimum that you can get him, he's going to think of you in that way, and that's the relationship you're going to have.
There's this situation that actually happened with a vendor. There was a whole bunch of channel stuff, and it was a $14 million deal that we brought to a vendor. Everything was going well, and then suddenly in the last 2 weeks, their leadership had decided they're going to rely on contractual stuff and say, "Hey, we're cutting you out, Anthony. We're doing this, and my instead of getting a 10%, it was going to be like a $5,000 thank you prize, right?" Suddenly they lost the deal really oddly. Could be. It was really, really fascinating. But it really, really everything comes down to relationships, right? And when you're trying to find the right, because you've said this a few times, find the right partner. How do you find the right partner besides it? Maybe it's somebody who you said, they focus on the industry. I always think there's a part of it like your partner has to be somebody that you actually get on with, that you actually like.
Well, that's a factor, but look, you don't get to get up and work with who you like. You got to get up and work with who does business in your sector. And I would tell you this goes all the way back to, if you're going to set up a channel, empower the channel properly. What does that mean? That means that your CEO, your CRO, your VP of sales is giving your sellers a directive to be asking early and often, "Hey man, so look, I know we're just getting started with this technology, this discussion. We have a lot of wood to chop to get you to understand our value proposition and where and how we could possibly bring outcomes to you that you're looking for." This is a seller talking, right? But he should early and often be asking like, hey, who are your trusted advisors, man? Where did you buy your last security apparatus from? Dot, dot, dot. Because the sooner that the reason I say that is because the more that the sellers can come back in a QBR and we can go, hey guys, so of all the sellers, who's hearing about Optive? Who's hearing about whomever, right? Now we get a handful of hands up there. Well, then we know that, okay, Optive's strong in the OT space that we play in. We need a relationship with Optive. That should come literally from your field. They should be the ones going, man, these guys own the relationship everywhere I go. Optive's the one delivering, this OT program or whomever it is. I'm using Optive as a name just because of Brad's history there, and I have a strong relationship with them. But the net of it is you should hear that from your sellers. Then it's the channel leader's job to go find the key folks, the guys that own the program, right? I mean, I'll just use OT as an example. Who's the OT leader for Optive? Who's the OT leader for, whomever, Sirius, whomever, Accenture? Go find those people, go do what you're supposed to do, which is go get those executive level relationships in place, have those conversations. And if you can establish, a relationship with that individual, then he'll give you access to his sellers, right? And the moment you find one opportunity and you guys just go focus on that thing, close it, even if you don't make a great margin, but close a deal with a partner. So you've got a deal closed that you can point to. And now you can push that out to all the rest of the sellers around the nation that Optic just closed a deal with X company. And here's a white paper around it. Here's how we won. Here's the wind wire around it, and just push that out there and just keep leaning on it. It's not rocket science. It's a lot of work is what it is. But if you do it well and you do it hard enough and long enough, you will reap the benefits. And once the leadership at a company starts to see, because one of the thing that I've always told my leadership is measure me on one metric more than anything. What is the partner initiated opportunities in every quarter? Right? Because anybody can pick up the phone and go, hey, man, you want to carry the paper here on this, dude? I'll give you 10 points. Anybody can do that. It's when the phone is ringing to our sellers and they're going, hey, I mentioned you guys in a meeting the other day. They want to set up a call, right? Partner initiated deals. That's how you should measure, a guy running your indirect sales team.
100%. Well, I think that's a good place to leave it. Mark, we always do a roundup.
Hold on. We have to acknowledge that. Like this, we're it feels like we're cutting it. There's so much. I feel like we got to have Mark back. We could just pick your brain. Maybe you bring, like, there's just a lot. I got to acknowledge that.
No, I mean, there is a lot. It's a big thing to stand up and it's a big commitment from a company. When they're going to do it right, because if not, you're going to spend money, you're going to spin cycles, and you're going to piss off your investors because they don't want to see money spent. So
100%. So we do a roundup at the end of these with one key takeaway. I'll start us off. I think, for me, it's the last point you made, Mark, which is commitment and alignment. And if you don't have everything from your pricing, your sales ops, your CEO, your sales leadership, even potentially to product, lined up around this, you're not going to be getting everything that you can possibly get out of it. And because the work is done at the field level, at the ground level, and through building relationships, and that takes time. And so if you're in and you're out, or you view everything opportunistically and you're taking deals around, like, it ain't going to work. And so that, I think that level of commitment from the beginning to say, this is how we run and this is what we're doing and this is the way we're going to grow, I think is really important.
Good to read more.
So for me, this conversation actually makes me feel like I just watched a cricket game. Like, I think I know it's a game. I know that there's people and there's like a ball and a thing, but I think I know what the objective is. The more I watch it, the more I'm like, man, I really don't know anything about the sport. And so my big takeaway is I need to go get educated a lot, right? There's just so many intricacies here. Even understanding the different partners, how they work. This is a way bigger deal than I actually acknowledged before or recognized coming into this conversation. So yeah, that's my takeaway. I feel
I'll
that.
lean into your analogy of cricket. Look, there's a very small faction of people in the world that love cricket, but if you find a cricket player, well, it's next to God, you
Yeah.
know. And you find a CEO whose channel took them to the next level and got them a significant buyout or an IPO, and you found yourself that cricket player. Yeah,
100%.
it's literally there. The two things I would say, man, is Brad, you hit the nail on the head. Like it's a company wide initiative. You're either doing this or you're not. Don't half-ass it because you're going to waste money. And then the other piece is, if anybody out there listening, pay attention to AWS and these big cloud sellers that's coming. And if you don't at least understand it and know when you want to jump into that arena, you're going to get left behind. Because if your competitor's on there and they're doing well and you don't know that, you'll just be losing deals to them and you won't even know why.
Yep. 100%.
Yeah, that's a really, really great point. This is awesome.
Awesome. Mark, thank you for joining us, my friend.
My pleasure. Anytime, man. Yeah, anytime. Good to see you guys. Wish you guys luck and happy Thanksgiving.
All right. We'll see y'all soon.
Thanks.